So I've got a pretty bold claim in today's video. I believe that what you believe about God is actually wrong.
Blasphemer!
And it doesn't matter if you're Buddhist, you're Christian, you're Muslim, you're Catholic, or you're even atheist, your picture of God is off. What do I mean by that? Well, you just have to stay tuned. So when I was a young child, I'd oftentimes dream about the future and think about what life would be like when I finally grew up. I often thought that I'd be exactly like my dad. I'd study dentistry, marry an Asian woman, and eventually settle down in Southern California. But then everything would change when I finally met Emily. And we first met, we fell in love with each other pretty quickly, and then all of my expectations were immediately smashed. We got married 1 year, exactly 365 days after our very first date. Then we moved to the East Coast, and I started teaching for nearly 2 years at a Bible college. Eventually, I would quit my job. I quit. And then start this YouTube channel, which incidentally, if this is your first time here, go and consider subscribing and clicking the thumbs up button because I make videos on like growing your faith and Christianity and all that kind of stuff. Hey guys, sorry about the mess behind me. I'm actually traveling for work and this is the only relatively quiet space that I could film a video in. What's my point? Even if I were just to look back on my life over the last few years, I found one lesson to be consistent throughout the entire thing, and it's this, that God almost always acts differently than I expect him to. Isaiah 55:8 says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, and neither are my ways your ways, declares the Lord." Throughout the scriptures, God is consistently upsetting people's expectations of the way things should be.
Yep.
As humans, we like to plan and dream about our career, about relationships, about education, and we always see consistently God smashing our expectations time and time again. Now, if you are one of those planners, you're like the kind of person who likes to have everything figured out, this can be really frustrating every time your expectations are dashed.
It's frustrating. It's frustrating.
And so with that in mind, this week, as I was studying the scriptures, I came across this passage that just jumped off the page. It said, "And he, Jesus, came unto his own, and his own did not receive him." And as I was reading this verse, I thought to myself, how in the world is this possible? I mean, how could they have missed it? Jesus literally walked on water, he healed the sick, he fed thousands of people, and even rose someone from the dead. And so I feel like you'd have to be an idiot. You have to be seriously blind to not see that there must be something special about Jesus. I mean, if you think about it, every single day they're singing songs about the Messiah, they're studying the prophecies pointing forward to his coming, and yet here he is walking in the flesh and he shows up and so many of them are just like, nah bro, I'm good. That's definitely not what we're looking for. So obviously I want to share with you guys my ideas, but before I do that, if you have any ideas or theories, let me know in the comment section below. I'd love to know what you think. Here's what I think the problem is. The problem comes down to expectations. The Jews had this very specific idea of what the Messiah was supposed to be. The Pharisees and the Sadducees had certain expectations that they were looking for, and they ultimately ended up rejecting Jesus simply because he didn't fit the bill. So for some context, at that time, the Jews were just conquered. They were dominated by the Romans, and what every Jewish person wanted was freedom. They wanted to just be free again. So naturally, they're looking for a conqueror. They're looking for a king, someone like Alexander the Great, who would rally the troops, lead them in battle, and eventually help them to overcome the Romans. So later in the book of John, there's this really interesting passage that shows up and helps us understand that this is exactly what they're wanting. John chapter 6 describes Jesus feeding the 5,000 people with the 5 loaves and the 2 fishes. Up to this point in the story, Jesus had turned water into wine, he's done a few miracles, but nothing like super serious.
Okay.
But verse 14 is interesting because the Bible says that after the people were fed, the people suddenly realized that Jesus must have been the prophesied one. And then get this, they try and take Jesus by force and force him to become their king.
Wow.
And if you think about it, this excitement makes sense. They're just so amped that Jesus was able to feed them because they immediately think that Jesus is going to fulfill all of their expectations of a military leader. How could the Jews possibly lose a war with a miracle worker like Jesus on their side? Not only can Jesus feed an entire army, but when the soldiers get hurt, he can heal them. And if they die, he can raise them from the dead. So of course, naturally, they believe that Jesus is the prophesied one. Why? Because he fits their expectations at the time. But notice what Jesus does. Instead of accepting their honor and confirming their expectations, Jesus actually does the opposite. Jesus runs away from them. He literally runs into the mountains and hides from the crowds because Jesus realized what they didn't realize at the time. Namely this, that their expectations were wrong, that their picture of who the Messiah, of who God was off. You see, while they wanted the Messiah to come and deliver them from physical bondage, from the bondage of the Romans, they did not realize that Jesus truly came to deliver them from the bondage of sin. Now, while this might be super easy for us to point out in hindsight, the challenge for us today is to not make the same mistake as them. We need to look inwardly and see if we're doing the same thing, because so many times we subconsciously demand things from God that He never promised. We expect God to make our lives happy and free from problems, but He never promised us this. In fact, if anything, God promised the exact opposite.
Oh, I see.
What you and I believe about God is wrong. Certainly not everything we believe about Him is wrong, but I can guarantee you this, that there is room for growth. If I know one thing to be true about God, it's this, that God fundamentally acts in ways that confound and challenge us. And so rather than thinking that we've got it all together, rather than being proud and unteachable, what if we approached God and the scriptures with humility? What if God, the true God, not the God that we have up here in our minds, but the God that Jesus came to reveal, what if that God was actually better than we could ever imagine? Guys, so I just watched the video that you're watching and I feel like such an idiot. The entire time there's this like one hair dangling on my face, but I'm not about to go and redo that entire video. So unfortunately it is what it is. But one thing I want to talk to you guys about is the title of this series. If you watched the first video, you can click or tap right over here. You know I asked you for a title. I gave the idea, the Jesus series. Some of you guys said you like it. A couple other suggestions were coming in. So I want to let you know, if you have any good ideas for this year-long sequence on the life of Jesus and you have a title, we'll vote on the best ones and you guys get to decide ultimately what this series is called. So let me know in the comment section below what you think and we'll go from there. See ya.